The luxurious grand lobby of the Ocean View Hotel sparkled with marble floors, glass chandeliers, and lavish decor. The faint scent of fresh flowers and premium perfumes wafted in the air, greeting every guest who entered this world of sophistication. This wasn't just a hotel, it was a symbol of high status, a place where only the elite were welcome, and that's exactly why Michael Davis had chosen it for his stay. Michael was a successful black CEO, the founder of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. His wealth, reputation, and influence had earned him a place in the upper echelons of society, and his presence at any event or establishment always turned heads. Today, he was visiting this five-star hotel for a business trip that had already been scheduled for weeks. He strode confidently to the check-in desk, his tailored suit sharp, his shoes polished to perfection. The receptionist, a woman in her early 30s with striking blonde hair, was busy typing on her computer. Her name tag read Rebecca. Michael smiled politely, his voice smooth and professional. "Good evening. I have a reservation under the name Michael Davis." Rebecca glanced at him briefly, her eyes narrowing slightly. She paused her typing and looked him up and down with an almost imperceptible frown, before glancing back at her screen. Michael didn't think much of it. People often gave him a second glance, assuming he might not belong, but it wasn't something that typically bothered him anymore. Michael Davis, she muttered, her fingers moving over the keyboard. She continued typing, but this time with a certain tension in her movements. "Sorry, sir, there seems to be an issue with your reservation." Michael raised an eyebrow. "An issue? I've already confirmed everything with your booking department. Is there a problem?" Rebecca cleared her throat. "It appears your reservation isn't showing up in our system. Perhaps there's been a mistake. Are you sure you made it with us?" Michael's patience began to thin. "I'm certain. I booked it directly through your website. I have the confirmation email here," he said, pulling out his phone and showing her the email. Rebecca took a moment to glance at the screen again, but this time her expression changed. She pursed her lips and stood up straight, fixing Michael with an icy stare. "You don't seem like the type of guest we usually host, Mr. Davis. Maybe you should try a different hotel." Her voice was cold, the thinly veiled condescension cutting through the words. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of racism before, but this was blatant, and from someone in the service industry no less. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of her disdain hanging over him. The longer he stood there, the more he realized that her refusal wasn't about the reservation. It was about something much deeper. It was personal. "I'm sorry, but I've already made plans here. I'm not going anywhere." Michael's voice was calm but firm, trying to maintain his composure. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Well, sir, you'll have to sort it out with someone else because I'm not going to help you. I'm afraid we can't accommodate you." She crossed her arms, her body language dismissive and arrogant. Michael stood there for a moment, disbelief settling over him like a heavy fog. He had dealt with prejudice before, but this was something entirely different. He had spent years building his empire from nothing, working harder than anyone else. And now, here he was, being turned away at a luxury hotel simply because of the color of his skin. Despite the initial shock, he remained calm. "I'm not leaving until you explain this. You can't just turn me away like this." Rebecca's lip curled into a small smirk. "You'll find that people like you don't get the same treatment here. You're not one of our usual guests. This is a high-end establishment, and we have certain standards," she replied dismissively, as if talking to a child. A spark of fury ignited inside Michael. He could feel his blood boiling, but he knew better than to lose his temper in a situation like this. Instead, he smiled, turned, and walked toward the exit, making sure to leave his business card on the counter. As Michael left the hotel, the injustice of it all weighed heavily on him, but he wasn't the type to let things go without addressing them. He would get answers. He would make sure this was not the last time Rebecca or anyone else at this hotel would treat him, or anyone else, this way. The incident at the Ocean View Hotel replayed in Michael's mind for days, gnawing at him like a persistent ache. He wasn't the type to let slights go unnoticed, especially one as blatant and discriminatory as the way he had been treated. But this time, he knew that a simple confrontation wouldn't be enough. He wasn't just going to let Rebecca's actions slide. He was going to make sure that the entire hotel felt the repercussions of their racist behavior. Michael was no stranger to power. As CEO of his company, he had spent years cultivating relationships with influential figures in business, media, and law. He had built an empire, navigating through the world with sharp precision and understanding that sometimes the most effective way to get results was not through direct confrontation, but through strategy, intelligence, and patience. He sat at his desk, the sleek glass surface reflecting the city skyline outside. The office was filled with the hum of technology, the subtle sound of a team of experts working remotely, but Michael was alone in his thoughts. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he prepared for his next move. He had learned everything he needed to know about the Ocean View Hotel. The owner, a man named Richard Donnelly, had built the hotel chain from the ground up. It was one of the most prestigious luxury hotel brands in the country, but like most establishments of its kind, there were cracks beneath the polished surface. His research revealed a few things that Michael could exploit: violations of customer rights, employees' complaints about mistreatment, and the hotel's less-than-stellar safety practices. But it wasn't just about the hotel. Michael had to make sure Rebecca's actions didn't go unpunished. After all, it wasn't just an isolated mistake. It was a reflection of a deeper, systemic problem. He knew he had to act swiftly and decisively, so he started by reaching out to a few trusted contacts in the media world. By the time he made the call, he had already arranged a discreet meeting with a lawyer known for taking on cases involving racial discrimination. The lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Natalie Lee, had built her career on bringing powerful companies to their knees when they crossed the line. Her services didn't come cheap, but Michael was willing to pay any price for justice. They arranged to meet the next morning. The following day, Michael sat across from Natalie in a quiet, upscale cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee surrounding them. He could see the intrigue in her eyes as she listened intently to his story. Michael recounted every detail of the incident, from the moment he walked into the hotel to the humiliating rejection he faced at the hands of Rebecca. Natalie, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp jawline and keen sense of justice, took notes as he spoke. "I've heard stories like this before," she said, her voice low but firm. "But this is personal, isn't it?" Michael nodded. "It's not just about me, it's about the principle. It's about making sure that people understand that there are consequences for this kind of behavior." "I agree," Natalie said, her eyes glinting with determination. "We can't let this slide. I'll start gathering information. We'll look into everything: Rebecca's employment records, the hotel's financials, and if there's a pattern of discrimination. I'll also talk to some journalists I know. We'll make this public. The media will pick it up." Michael leaned forward. "Make sure the focus is on Rebecca's actions. Expose her role in this. I want her to be the face of this scandal, not just the hotel. People need to see the personal side of it. The woman who denied me, who made me feel inferior, needs to answer for that." Natalie gave a sharp nod. "Understood. We'll also see if we can dig into the hotel's practices. If there's a chance to expose them for violating any laws, we'll take it." That evening, Michael sat in his penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle below as he reviewed the plan he had just set in motion. He wasn't just going to humiliate Rebecca. He was going to make sure the Ocean View Hotel paid a heavy price for what they had done. The hotel chain's reputation was everything. If he could destroy that, if he could expose them for what they truly were, then he would send a message loud and clear: racism would not be tolerated. Not now, not ever. The next day, Natalie came through on her promise. She delivered the initial findings, including a list of employees who had complained about Rebecca's behavior in the past. Several of them had quit because of the toxic environment she helped perpetuate. There were also records of complaints from customers who felt they had been discriminated against, but these had been swept under the rug. One thing became clear: Rebecca wasn't just a lone offender. She was part of a system that allowed racism to thrive. This wasn't going to be easy, but Michael was prepared. He had a plan, and it was about to unfold in ways that would make Rebecca and everyone at the Ocean View Hotel regret crossing him. The night was just beginning when the first articles started to surface online. Michael sat back in his chair, watching as the story broke, each new headline feeding his anticipation like fuel to a fire. He knew that what was coming next would change everything for the Ocean View Hotel. The scandal he had set in motion was about to explode. It started with a report from a local news outlet, a small but trusted source for investigating corporate misconduct. The headline read, "Luxury Hotel Under Fire After Racial Discrimination Incident at Reception." The article highlighted Michael's experience at the Ocean View Hotel and included a detailed recount of his rejection by Rebecca, the receptionist. It was a powerful, emotionally charged story, but Michael wasn't stopping there. By the next morning, the media storm was fully underway. Journalists from major news outlets picked up the story, digging deeper into the allegations. As promised, Natalie had uncovered a series of similar complaints about the hotel. some dating back several years. Rebecca's name was front and center, and her behavior was being scrutinized by the public. But Michael had planned for this moment. He was ready to turn up the pressure. While the news outlets focused on Rebecca's actions, Michael turned to his network in the corporate world. He used his influence to push for a corporate investigation, one that would examine not just Rebecca's misconduct, but the hotel's overall culture. It didn't take long for the spotlight to shift from a single incident to an institutional problem. People were talking, and the story was gaining momentum. Meanwhile, inside the Ocean View Hotel's corporate offices, panic was beginning to take root. Richard Donnelly, the hotel's owner, paced nervously across his expansive office, his hands clenched into fists. He had spent decades building the Ocean View Hotel's pristine reputation, and now, all of that was at risk. He couldn't allow this scandal to spiral out of control. "Where the hell is Rebecca?" Donnelly snapped at his assistant, who looked as though she had just seen a ghost. "She's not answering her phone, sir. She hasn't been in the office all morning." Donnelly gritted his teeth, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "This is a disaster. If she's gone rogue, we'll be in serious trouble. The media is calling this the worst kind of corporate racism, and the customers are starting to demand answers." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, we've already seen a spike in negative reviews on social media. People are sharing their own experiences with the hotel and Rebecca. There are even petitions forming." "Damn it," Donnelly shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "I told them we needed to screen our staff better. I didn't think it would go this far. Where is the damn public relations team?" As panic spread throughout the corporate offices, the hotel's reputation began to crumble. The employees who had once stayed silent, fearful of the hotel's leadership, were now speaking out. Former workers began to publicly share their negative experiences with the hotel, revealing stories of mistreatment and bias. It wasn't just Rebecca anymore. It was a larger, more deeply rooted problem within the organization. But Michael had one final move left to make. He called a press conference. The announcement was short but impactful. With Michael Davis, CEO of the Davis Group, would be speaking about his experience at the Ocean View Hotel. The public was eager to hear from the man at the center of the controversy. The media outlets had already painted a vivid picture, but Michael knew that his words, delivered in person, would shift the narrative in his favor. When he walked into the conference room the following day, he stood tall, his presence commanding attention. The room went silent as he approached the podium. His speech was measured, deliberate, but the passion behind his words was undeniable. "My name is Michael Davis, and I'm here today not just to talk about what happened to me at the Ocean View Hotel, but to highlight a deeper issue that continues to affect far too many people: racism and discrimination in places where we should feel safe and welcome. What happened to me in that hotel lobby was not an isolated incident. It is part of a larger, systemic problem." Michael paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for everyone who has ever been turned away, mistreated, or made to feel less than human, and I will not rest until accountability is served." He continued, highlighting the racial discrimination he faced, the mistreatment of employees, and the systemic issues within the hotel chain. He revealed the extensive investigation that had been carried out and the mounting evidence against the hotel. But Michael wasn't done yet. He had one more piece of information to share. He was filing a formal lawsuit against the Ocean View Hotel for racial discrimination. "Today, I am not just seeking justice for myself. I am fighting for every person who has ever been subjected to discrimination. The Ocean View Hotel will be held accountable for their actions, and I will make sure of it." As Michael's words reverberated across the media, the tide had fully turned. The hotel was under attack from all sides. Employees who had been afraid to speak out now rallied behind Michael, their voices adding weight to the growing movement. The public backlash was swift and severe. By the end of the week, Rebecca had been suspended, and an independent investigation into the hotel's practices was underway. The media coverage continued to escalate, and Richard Donnelly's every move was being scrutinized. He had hoped to bury this scandal, to ignore it until it faded away, but Michael had made sure that wasn't going to happen. The hotel's reputation was shattered, and their reputation for being an elite establishment was forever tainted. But Michael wasn't done yet. He was just getting started. The Ocean View Hotel's facade was now crumbling, the weight of Michael's relentless campaign pulling it down with a force that could no longer be ignored. What started as a single incident of racial discrimination had now become a full-scale public relations disaster. Rebecca, the receptionist who had instigated the entire debacle, had been suspended, and a public apology was issued on behalf of the hotel. But for Michael, that wasn't enough. The damage done to his reputation, the humiliation, and the injustice demanded a response far more severe than a simple apology or a token gesture. Richard Donnelly had underestimated Michael's resolve, and now, he would pay the price. Michael had been in touch with some of the most powerful figures in media and law, his team of lawyers tirelessly working to build an airtight case against the Ocean View Hotel. But he knew that a lawsuit alone would not suffice. He needed to expose the hotel for what it truly was, a bastion of discrimination, where people like Rebecca were allowed to thrive, unchecked and emboldened by the system that enabled them. The final piece of his strategy fell into place when Natalie, his lawyer, uncovered a damning connection between Ocean View Hotel's leadership and several controversial figures in the hospitality industry, people who had been accused of fostering discriminatory practices but had somehow managed to avoid any real consequences. Michael now had leverage. It was late one evening when Michael received a call from Natalie. Her voice was calm, but Michael could hear the urgency in it. "We've got everything we need," she said. "We've traced the money, the influence, and the connections. We know who's behind this. It's bigger than just Rebecca or even the hotel chain. It's systemic. The leadership here has been protecting people like her for years." Michael felt a surge of adrenaline. "What's the next step?" "We go public," Natalie replied. "We bring this to light. We expose the entire network that allowed this kind of behavior to thrive." Michael leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming on his lips. This was it, the final blow. He wasn't just going to take down Rebecca or the Ocean View Hotel. He was going to expose the corrupt system that allowed people like Rebecca to act with impunity. The press conference was scheduled for the following week, and the build-up to it was electric. Michael's team had been working in overdrive, gathering evidence, preparing their statement, and ensuring that every detail of the story would be backed up with irrefutable facts. By now, Michael's face was everywhere, his name synonymous with justice in the fight against discrimination. The room where the press conference was held was filled with journalists, eager to hear what Michael had to say. His lawyer, Natalie, stood beside him, her presence a calm contrast to the storm that was about to unfold. Michael took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. "My name is Michael Davis, and I stand before you today not just as a victim of discrimination, but as someone who has uncovered the truth about an industry that has allowed this kind of behavior to thrive for far too long," he began, his voice steady and firm. "What happened to me at the Ocean View Hotel was not a mistake. It was not an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger, more insidious system that has allowed powerful individuals to perpetuate inequality for their own gain." He paused, letting the words settle. The room was silent, every eye on him. "I have spent the last few weeks working with a team of lawyers, investigators, and journalists to uncover the full extent of what's been going on behind the scenes. And what we found is shocking. Ocean View Hotel and its leadership have been shielding employees like Rebecca from accountability. They've created a culture where racism is allowed to fester, where discrimination is ignored, and where people like Rebecca are emboldened to treat guests, customers, and employees with complete disregard for their basic rights." The journalists in the room exchanged glances, their pens moving furiously as Michael continued. "But it doesn't stop there. We've traced the money, the connections, and the influence. This is not just about one hotel, it's about a larger network of people who have been able to operate with impunity because of their wealth and status. They've been protecting each other, covering up the truth, and making sure that anyone who tries to expose their behavior is silenced." Michael's words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room felt heavy with the gravity of what he had just revealed. "We're not going to let that happen anymore," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "I'm here today to make sure that the people responsible for this discrimination are held accountable. From Rebecca, who thought she could get away with humiliating me, to the leadership of Ocean View Hotel who allowed it to happen. We're going to expose them for who they really are, and we're going to make sure that they face the consequences of their actions." As Michael finished his statement, the reporters erupted into a frenzy of questions, but he didn't answer. He didn't need to. His message had been delivered, and the media was already picking up the story. What followed was a relentless barrage of coverage. News outlets picked up every detail, digging deeper into the connections Michael had uncovered. Investigative journalists began to pore through Ocean View Hotel's financial records, revealing a web of corrupt dealings and hidden ties to powerful individuals who had long been above the law. The fallout for Ocean View Hotel was immediate. Richard Donnelly, the owner, was forced to step down, and the company's stock prices plummeted. The hotel chain was besieged by lawsuits, protests, and a public relations nightmare that seemed impossible to escape. Employees who had been silent for years now came forward, giving testimony about the toxic, discriminatory culture they had endured. The company's leadership was exposed for their role in perpetuating this culture, and the fallout was far-reaching. Rebecca, meanwhile, was not spared. The public outcry was swift and brutal. Her career was ruined, and she faced legal consequences for her actions. But for Michael, this was just the beginning. He wasn't looking for revenge, he was looking for justice, and he had gotten it. As the media frenzy continued, Michael's phone rang late into the night. It was Natalie. "We've done it," she said. "They're done. The system that protected them is falling apart." Michael leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the skyline outside. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. Justice had been served, and the world had been shown the truth. This was just the beginning of Michael's fight. The ripple effects of his actions would be felt for years to come. But for now, he had taken down a giant, one corrupt hotel chain at a time. The world was watching, and Michael knew that this was only the start of something much bigger.